During the 7th Space War, the United Nations Earth was working on several Gundam-type mobile suits in preparation for their final decisive battle against the Space Revolutionary Army. And one of these machines was the GW9800 Gundam Airmaster, a state-of-the-art mobile suit that could do something no others could at the time. Thanks to its trans system, it could transform from mobile suit mode to a jet-like mobile armor mode called fighter mode. This gave it incredible speed and range, and on Earth, this even allowed for independent flight. Another benefit of this system was that the frame of the Airmaster had to be as light as possible. This then made it not just one of the most agile Gundams around, but pretty much the most agile mobile suit of the entire war. The downside then was that its armor was weaker and that its weapons loadout had to be similarly light. It still had a fair selection, and it was still more heavily armed than the average mass production mobile suit, but it definitely had less weapons and also weaker weapons than the other two Gundam types. Its main weapons were two Buster rifles. These little technological marvels were custom made for the Airmaster with the weight requirements of its transformation mechanism in mind. From the get-go, they were designed to be as light as possible, so they were made out of the same Luna titanium alloy as the Gundam itself. A durable yet lightweight material, resulting in the Buster rifles weighing only about half as much as a standard beam rifle, and yet they still managed to be more powerful. In mobile suit mode, they're handheld, and in fighter mode, they're hooked up to the forearms and can still be fired. And when not in use, they can be stored on the side skirts. Next up, we have the head-mounted Vulcan guns. Pretty much the same as the Vulcan guns mounted in the other Gundams. They're not particularly strong and only really useful for close combat. But for a lightly armed Gundam like the Airmaster, they're still a very welcome addition. More powerful then are the nose Vulcans mounted on the nose cone. As you've probably guessed, these were mostly intended to be used in fighter mode, but they were also surprisingly effective in mobile suit mode as kinda improvised anti-aircraft guns. And that's already all of the standard weapons that it came with. But it still had one secret weapon that it shared with the other Gundam units. Installed in every Gundam was the new type only flash system. This system allowed for a new type pilot to control up to 12 G-bit mobile suits at once. These machines were unmanned, simplified versions of their respective Gundams. For the Leopard, there was the GT bit, for the Gundam X, the GX bit, and for the Airmaster, the GW bit. Its only weapons are two Buster rifles, and its armor now looks a little bit more like the Daughtras, but it could still transform into fighter mode. The Airmaster saw limited production, along with the Leopard and Gundam X, and would be used in the final battle of the 7th Space War. When the Space Revolutionary Army threatened to drop multiple colonies onto the Earth, the UNE was confident that their brand new Gundams would be able to stop them. They weren't. Dozens of colonies hit the planet, devastating the surface. But things weren't that much better for the Space Revolutionary Army either. The Gundams were still able to inflict heavy losses upon them, making this a battle with no clear winners, only losers, and billions upon billions of dead civilians. 15 years later, civilization had finally begun to recover a little bit, but it was now radically different. Rather than a single unified government, the Earth was now ruled by local warlords and bands of scavengers calling themselves vultures. It is unknown exactly how many Airmasters survived the war, but at the moment of recording, we know of at least 2 surviving units. The most famous one belonged to a vulture known as Witz, who had received it from an unnamed vulture as payment. Originally, this Airmaster seems to have been kept in its stock configuration, but after joining up with the Freedom vultures, it would get several modifications. The first modification was a very simple one. Because the Airmaster lacked firepower, 2 large missiles that they found in an old UNE weapons depot were mounted on the wings above the shoulders. How they function, though, seems to vary from source to source. In non-animated sources, they're usually described as cluster missiles. They'll be fired, and then before impact, they release a bunch of smaller, but still very powerful warheads. In the anime and video games, though, they seem to act more like standard missiles and simply explode on impact. A much larger round of modifications, then, was necessary after the Airmaster was barely able to defeat 2 Gedeels. While it was able to emerge victorious, it didn't do so without a lot of damage itself. So, it was up to the Freedom's main engineer, Kit Salsa-Mill, to fix the heavily damaged Airmaster. And while it was at it, why not give it a brand new paint job as well as some upgrades, which he could do thanks to the support from the People's Republic of Astarte, turning it from the Airmaster into the Airmaster Burst. As we've covered before, the Airmaster's main issue was its lack of firepower. Now, back in the day, this wasn't that much of an issue because it wasn't designed to be fighting by itself. It would be fighting alongside other Gundams, other mobile suits, and its own bit mobile suits. But for the Vultures, things were a bit different. They would often fight by themselves, or at best, in small groups. Therefore, Kit's main focus was giving the Airmaster more and more powerful weapons so that it could stand by itself. The nose cone looks like it was replaced with a brand new one. The old one was heavily damaged, and the new one looks very different, including, of course, the weapons. Gone are the nose Vulcans, and in their place, we've got 2 nose beam cannons. There's a really large one mounted underneath the nose cone, and then a smaller one mounted in the armor that's styled to look like a canopy. It is worth mentioning, though, that the smaller beam cannon is never used in the series, which is why we sometimes also don't see it listed as part of its weapons. And just like the nose Vulcans, the nose beam cannons could also still be used in mobile suit mode as makeshift anti-aircraft guns, but now significantly more powerful. Next up, the wingtips. These were equipped with booster pods containing 2 booster beam cannons and 2 powerful thrusters to compensate for all that extra weight. And on top of that, these booster pods were movable, giving the Airmaster Burst a big agility boost, despite now having a lot more weapons. And this wasn't just limited to fighter mode. The transformation mechanism of the wings was changed a bit so that the wings could be deployed in mobile suit mode as well. This then allowed it to use those booster beam cannons in mobile suit mode as well. And those booster pods weren't the only upgrades to its thrust. On its legs and front skirts, it also got more powerful thrusters, which then allowed it to even carry the heavy Gundam Leopard Destroy. Its final new weapon then is a weapon that only appears in the 1/100 scale model kit, the Missile Rifle. This is a double-barreled beam rifle that also has 2 missiles equipped to the side. No details are given about these missiles, but on the model kit, they're identical to the cluster missiles used by the regular Airmaster. What has remained the same then are the head-mounted Vulcan guns, the 2 Buster rifles, and its ability to use bit mobile suits. Provided that 1, the pilot is a new type, and 2, that you can still find any bit mobile suits, which is going to be extremely hard, because after the war, no GW bits were ever seen again. But what if all of this still wasn't enough? Introducing the G-Falcon, a support fighter that was made by the UNE for the Leopard, the Airmaster, and the Gundam X. And it also still functioned with their respective upgrades. The Airmaster Burst never ended up using it, but we do get this simulation image of how it would look. The Airmaster Burst in fighter mode would dock with the G-Falcon's B parts, creating a high-speed cruising mode with a thrust more powerful than that of contemporary warships. Plus, it also had access to extra weapons. The G-Falcon's B parts had 2 scattering beam cannons and 10 infrared homing missiles, so it was both fast and deadly. But again, this configuration was unfortunately never used in the anime. And talking about things that weren't used, according to the Gundam X Hyper Guide, Kit Salsa Mill also came up with 3 other upgrades for the damaged Airmaster: the Gunmaster, the Swordmaster, and the Aquamaster. They're all described as being fantastic in their own right, but it's easy to see why the Airmaster Burst was the most well-rounded of these upgrades, and why that was the one they eventually went with. Also, every single one of these upgrades uses parts from mobile suits and mobile armors from different series, and even from something that's not from Gundam. So let's jump in with the Gunmaster. The main goal here was to upgrade the Airmaster's weapons, but unlike with the Burst, where mobility was taken into account, the weapons here were pushed to such an extreme that its mobility seriously suffered. And the biggest culprit of this was no doubt its brand new handheld weapon, the Mega Beam Cannon, inspired by the Neo Gundam's G-Bird. There are some small differences, but you can see that it's very much meant to be the same weapon, even down to the thrusters on the back of it. I'm also pretty sure that it's longer than the Gunmaster itself, so I wonder what happens to it when the Gunmaster transforms, which it should still be able to do according to the weapon description. The nose Vulcans are replaced with nose beam cannons, which are described as being only usable in fighter mode. Its other weapons then are a shoulder-mounted beam cannon and 4 arm-mounted homing missiles. And finally, its other big upgrade were radiator fins inspired by the Gundam F90 VSBR type. These were added to the legs and the shoulder-mounted beam cannon. No explanation is given for these, but I think it's very safe to assume that these were there to dissipate the heat generated by all of those beam weapons. Next up, we have the Swordmaster, a variant that's kinda like the exact opposite of the original Airmaster. The original one didn't have any close combat weapons, no real ones at least, we're not counting the Vulcan guns, and the Swordmaster now makes close combat weapons its main weapons. Installed on its arms are 2 electromagnetic sabers that look an awful lot like the swords on the Blowspear Yellow type from Mospeada. They're different enough to be their own thing, but similar enough to be clearly influenced by them. But anyways, the Swordmaster's other weapons consisted of just the head-mounted Vulcan guns and a pair of beam cannons mounted on the nose cone. And again, these are described as only being usable in fighter mode, meaning that the Swordmaster could still transform. While it was much stronger in close combat, it now really suffered when it came to long combat and even mid-range combat. And last but not least, we have the Aquamaster, an underwater version with some pretty drastic changes. The first is that the nose cone has been replaced by a submarine-esque support booster, and that the shoulders have an additional booster pod inspired by the boosters of the Tallgeese. The support booster has 8 torpedo tubes, and the not Tallgeese boosters have 4 torpedo tubes each. The second modification then is that the lower arms have now been replaced with Alpha Aziero lookalikes, even down to the claw on the left arm, which houses a beam cannon. The right arm has a more standard looking hand, and despite seemingly also having a beam cannon, no further weapons are listed. And finally, I think it's also using the side skirts from the Tallgeese. And believe it or not, but this wasn't the only underwater version of the Airmaster. In the Gundam Combat card game, we've also got this unit, simply called the Airmaster Underwater version. The nose cone has once again been completely changed with an underwater use backpack, the legs got extra thrusters, and its main weapon is now an underwater version of the Buster Rifle. Back to the standard Airmaster then, for the second unit that was confirmed to have survived the war. This Airmaster appears in Afterwar 0017 and is briefly seen being used by a vulture named Linn. After being damaged though, the Gundam is sold, never to be seen again. And that has been all for the Gundam Airmaster's development history. At least for now, because who knows, maybe the 30th anniversary project will have something in store for us. I don't expect it to, but I can always hope. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.